Okay. We'll call the meeting of the Newcastle Planning Board to order. The day is October 19th, 2023. Time is 6:31. Next on the agenda is to review the minutes of our September 21st, 2023 Planning Board meeting. Do we have a motion on those minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second? Second, moved and seconded. Comments, changes, anything about the minutes that anyone saw? I thought they were very good distillation of that
That's what I
meeting.
tried to do. I'm
Yep.
trying, it takes these minutes, and Damer's it's been taking a lot of time, so I'm trying to condense.
Yeah.
I think MMA only really says we need to have the motion, second,
And vote.
record the vote.
Yeah.
I'd like to put a little more in than that,
Yeah.
but so if it gets too thin, you let me know, please.
No, I thought it was great. And then of course, right at the bottom there, or somewhere in there, you included the link to the, the YouTube. So,
Yes.
anyone can watch the video in its entirety. So, that was great. All right. So Peter, you weren't here, but, all in favor of passing the minutes from September 21st? 3 yes. I'm assuming you're abstaining. You can't. Correct. All right, so that's that. Tab closed. Move on to old business. We have a subdivision application, tax map 013 lot 017-001 10 Mills Road. Applicant 10 Mills Road, Newcastle LLC. So we will invite the applicant to come on up, and we will have a period for public comment after after we discuss the application and we hear from the planner. At that point, after we'll open for public comment. So, hello. This is a continuation from this application. We had held a pre-submittal meeting at our last planning board meeting back in September. And so this is the next step, having brought the application forward. So you want to give us a quick rundown? Don't have to go into a whole lot of detail because that's already available online.
And I should just say, I'm not sure if you already mentioned it. This is a public hearing because that's required for subdivision.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the other technicality that may or may not be relevant is we're only really discussing subdivision that has to go before the planning board. The use permit and small project plan doesn't have to go to the planning board. It still has to meet all the same requirements, but the code enforcement officer can permit that stuff. You'll still see all the details and everything. Are a lot of them, which we don't need to worry about. So just want to make that for the record.
Thank you.
So the project is to subdivide the property that into two legal lots, and then further subdivide one of those virtually to create buildable lots under the code. We're triggering subdivision for multiple reasons. One, for the Newcastle, number of units is more than 3. Let me back up. So I'm proposing to build 2 8-unit apartment buildings on its own virtual lot. And we're triggering subdivision because of that 16 units. We would also be triggering it even if Newcastle wasn't regulating by units, but by land, because a few years ago I had subdivided a parcel into the parcel that I have now, and there's a piece that was subdivided off of that. So I would be triggering subdivision anyway, because it would be 3 parcels over within a time period. So basically, again, the plan is to build 2 8-unit apartment buildings on the front of the site, and retain the back of the site for potential future development.
Awesome. And so I understand you have since the pre-submittal meeting a month ago, you and the town planner have been working on the application, and Michael has prepared a draft finding of facts for us, and I thought maybe the best way to go about this is to just have Michael step us through the finding of facts, hit the high notes. We don't have to summarize the whole thing or go through the whole thing
Mhm.
in its entirety, but if we just hit the high points, specifically those, I don't know what they are, 11, 14 points for subdivision, because that's really what we're discussing. And then we can have a conversation throughout that process. And then after we have that, then we'll open it up for the public hearing.
Sounds good.
So I think maybe the not so obvious place to start is actually at the end to identify those several items that the board will need to find that the subdivision application is consistent with. So if you're following along, the conclusions of law, I have on this draft finding of facts and conclusion of law, I highlighted several items that basically will, I expect that you'll find that the plan is consistent with. So the proposed subdivision will not result in undue water or air pollution, will not cause an unreasonable burden on the existing water supply, and the project can be served as planned, will not cause unreasonable soil erosion or reduction in land's capacity to hold water, will not cause unreasonable highway or public road congestion or unsafe conditions. The subdivision will provide for adequate sewage waste disposal and will not cause an unreasonable burden on municipal services. Subdivision will not have an undue adverse effect on the scenic or natural beauty of the area, will not adversely affect the quality or quantity of groundwater, and will provide adequate stormwater management. So that's generally where we are working towards. So I would just like to and that all essentially falls under Article 7 in administration, Section 12 subdivision. So that all needs to go to, as we mentioned, it has to go to the planning board. There has been a pre-submittal meeting, which happened at September 21st, and the approval standards. So
so on your finding of facts, that starts on page 6.
Yep, should have put page numbers. Why? Yeah, page 6. So authority planning board is going to review this process we've already addressed. All right. So one of the issues, the first thing is it needs to meet the standards of this code, which is the core zoning code. Since we're not reviewing the whole project for the entire code, just the subdivision, I figured what would make sense is to put a condition on any approval that basically George, the code enforcement officer, finds that this is the plan. He doesn't find any inconsistencies with the plan. So we can revisit that at the end. Just wondering what the best way. I've gone through it. I imagine you all have, but I figure we probably want to present this plan to the public.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we just step through, A through whatever it is, I know, J, K, M, oh my God,
Yeah,
Q, S, T, U, the whole alphabet.
you, I think, is the last one.
Yeah, let's just step through that. You don't, I don't want to read the whole thing out loud. This is available. It's publicly available, but again, you've highlighted in bold the parts that are applicable to each one of those things. So for example, and I don't want to speak for you, but item C, pollution. The proposed subdivision will not result in undue water or air pollution. And then you've got a nice block there explaining how that is addressed by the application and so on and so forth. So item D, sufficient water. The proposed subdivision will be served by GSB Water District. Municipal water supply. Item E, subdivision will be served by the GSB Water District and provided a letter stating the proposed development will not cause an unreasonable burden or exceed the capacity of the existing water supply or system. I mean, those are the kind of things that subdivision, I think, is really aimed at, right? So erosion, traffic, I'll just list what they are. Sewage disposal, municipal solid waste disposal, which does not apply. You got a good block here on aesthetic, cultural, and natural values. That's probably worth reading.
Yeah, so there are some, and I just wanted to put up on the screen here for anybody who's at home or in the audience. This is generally the site plan. This is how the property is going to be subdivided. The subject property is within this blue line. It runs off a little bit. It ends just a little bit up here. That's not being developed in this, but the two buildings are down here. These, I believe, are virtual lot lines. Is that right?
Correct. So lot one and one A and one B are the two virtual lots. So legally there'll be a lot one, and then for the purpose of the code, the virtual lot line is between those two buildings.
Yeah, so the lot 2 is going to end right about here.
Correct.
And then, so this is the only frontage lot 2 has on the street. It's 20 feet, which
20 feet on Mills Road, but
On
it
Mills
also
Road,
has
yes.
frontage on the
That's
private
right,
road.
yeah. And so then these two buildings are separated by this virtual lot line, and this whole area here is a road, private road. That's in conformance with the plan. So I just wanted to lay that out there. At least I'm a visual person. Now I just want to find. So, undue water and air. Sorry, Ben, do you want to go through pollution? You want to go through any of my comments, or do you just want to go right to, I guess we probably should actually go through them. So it's for the record.
Go ahead.
So parcel of land addressed by this application is entirely 38 feet or more above sea level. One of the issues was whether or not it's in the flood zone. It is not. The site is served by the GSB sanitary sewer, making the nature of the soil as it relates to septic or wastewater is going to be kind of irrelevant as long as the sanitary district, continues to function and it's served properly. So I would think, unless the board has any questions on pollution, that shouldn't be an issue. Sufficient water, again, this is going to be served by the GSB water district, which we can discuss. So there's two standards. One is sufficient water, should have sufficient water based on, because it's going to be using the municipal water supply. So municipal water supply, the proposed subdivision will be served by the GSB water district and has been provided with a letter that's stating the proposed development will not cause an unreasonable burden. So I think that should satisfy that criteria. Erosion, there really is not. Most of the site's going to be planted in grass other than what's underneath the building, which then be underneath the building. So I don't think there's going to be much erosion there. You did mention that in the application, the driveway is going to be gravel, which, it's not really going to be pervious, but the gravel should keep any erosion to a minimum, considering the slope. The site is not sloped exactly steeply. So I suggest that meets the erosion requirement. Traffic, I think you got the proposed subdivision will utilize an existing entrance that was originally approved by Maine DOT in 2007. And you have a approval or an application, right?
An approval.
A new approval.
That was attached.
So the driveway is existing. Maine DOT, if they approve it, I would, and it's a state road, I don't see any reason why the town can't approve it. Um, they suggest that it's going to be between 3,000 and 4,000 trips per day on Mills Road.
That was I looked up traffic counts from the Maine DOT website. And so they've got in their application, they've got a table that if you to determine whether it's a driveway or an entrance. And so they've got a way of calculating what a projected number of trips per day. And based on the number of units, that would say, 52.8 trips per day might be generated by the occupants. And I looked up the traffic counts from, the newest one is, I think, a couple years old. And they varied over the last 5 years before that from 3,000 to 4,000 trips per day on Mills Road. So it's basically not making any difference to the traffic on Mills Road. That's the point.
And I would, those at 52.8 trips per day from this development, usually those traffic counts tend to be generous with how much people are coming and going. That's my opinion. But also the location of this is pretty close to town. So I'm assuming you're going to get more walking, more pedestrians go than otherwise might be expected if this was further down Mills Road or out on Academy. Not that that's going to reduce it to zero, but this is probably a pedestrian friendlier location than the assumptions might otherwise indicate. All right, so sewage disposal, as I mentioned, served by sanitary district. So there was a letter that you provided from the sanitary district saying they can service and it's not going to be beyond their capacity. The municipal solid waste, Newcastle doesn't provide municipal solid waste disposal. It's not a service we provide. So you stated you're going to manage any waste disposal yourself, or the site is. So I can't imagine that's going to provide or going to be a burden on the municipal capacity. So authentic, cultural, and natural values. This was, I think, this is one of the longer ones. Scenic natural beauty of the area will be developed. I believe you're leaving the trees up at the front of the site.
That's a priority.
Yeah, which those are significant. So those will remain, which is nice. And then also in the back on your plan, you identified two tree lines that are back here that are approximate.
Right. There's a number of trees between those dashed lines. So the idea is to not go into those. If we can, and I think we can avoid it with this layout.
Yeah, I would think those, even for construction, getting around the building, I don't think that
Yeah.
should get too close to those.
And that's part of the just maybe to look back at the plan. The frontage in this district has a maximum front setback.
Right.
And that's the dashed line on the bottom. And I've moved the building back basically to, pretty close to that line to stay away from the roots of the trees. And that also keeps it pretty much in line with the other buildings on the street.
All right. I would say I'll just read what I wrote here. The scenic or natural beauty and the general aesthetics of the area will not be significantly impacted by the proposed subdivision, as the residential nature and limited scale of the proposed project are consistent with the adopted core zoning code and comprehensive plan of the town of Newcastle. No historic sites have been identified on or adjacent to the proposed subdivision. No significant wildlife habitat areas identified by the Department of Inland Fisheries and Waterlife are on or near the proposed subdivision. No rare and irreplaceable natural areas identified by the town are on or near the proposed subdivision. The site of the proposed subdivision is not proximate to any water body. There's no public rights for physical or visual access to the shoreline. None of those have been identified on or adjacent to the proposed subdivision. So those are all identified in the code or, that's why I specifically addressed anything that was there. And then we've already discussed the existing tree line at the rear of the site. Just noticing I didn't mention those trees at the front of the site, but
Yeah.
we just discussed them, so I can add that in there. Right. Financial and technical capacity. This is another note that I would recommend putting on any approvals as a condition. The code requires financial and technical capacity, which I believe we discussed at our last meeting. However, this application or the development is applying for the 2003 rural affordable housing grant from the Maine Housing. So I guess it's going to be dependent on that. So in order to demonstrate financial and technical capacity, it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing. Until you get an award, you don't really have the financial capacity to do this project. But the award, you get points for having an approved project. So one of the ways that we figured we could help is approving the project contingent and with a condition that the award is the developer gets the award from Maine Housing. So essentially it's going to be approved, assuming that it gets awarded. If Maine Housing does not award you the grant, then the approval would essentially be revoked.
Is there a time frame that you expect that approval to arrive? Generously looking at it,
Presumably sometime early next year, we would know, but then there's also going to be a second round. They're planning to have a second round in June. So if I did not get an award in the first round, I would maintain my, permit and apply again in the summer.
so if we were to put a sunset clause on it or something like that, sometime this time next year or something like that.
Yeah, something like I guess if they do it again in the summer, it would presumably be a few months for them to figure out awards. So that ought to be reasonable. But I think isn't that standard that a permit if you don't?
Well, a
Oh, zoning, yeah.
zoning is different than an actual building permit.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And subdivision.
And
And
subdivision.
Yeah,
subdivision,
even more
right?
different.
So, right, so subdivision, once it's approved, it's platted, it's recorded at the registry of
Right.
deeds, it is forever until it's modified or revoked, which would require another meeting and approval of the planning board. That's subdivision.
Right.
So that part is just done.
Yeah.
But that also brings up an interesting question. If the subdivision of approval has a condition, then I can't record the plat. In the code, it also says that the zoning approval, like the small project plan and the use permit, can't be given until the plat is recorded.
Correct. I was actually going to make the suggestion that this condition be removed from the subdivision and placed on the building permit that presumably the CEO would do, because you're allowed to subdivide land, which is really what we're talking about here.
Right.
Sort of however you want without building anything, for example.
Right. So yeah,
Before you build anything, or whether you build anything or not.
right. I think that makes a lot of sense. Because it's otherwise you're kind of in a catch-22 that you can't.
It is a
Do the
chicken and the
thing.
egg thing, exactly, yeah.
And I think that my understanding, the reason for having the demonstrating financial ability is to hopefully ensure that we don't have elevator shafts sitting around for years.
But that doesn't
I'm not building an elevator, so.
happen. So
But I think that, given that the sort of the intent.
eventually,
Eventually, right.
I think that the condition, well, I mean, we can discuss,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
here now. I guess we
Yeah.
should discuss it right now, but, financial and technical capacity, I still think it seems strange to place a condition there for, when I think about it as just subdivision approval. I think it seems strange to place that condition there. I think it might be important to have that condition somewhere, maybe, but not necessarily on the subdivision. Because you're gonna have to, like, if you get the approval tonight, right, then you have to record it with the registry of deeds. You actually have to do it
Before I can do
before you can do anything.
anything else, right?
Right. You gotta make it a real subdivision
Right. Before I can apply for the, Small project
apply for
plan.
the small project. plan. Right. So I would say that we could, we would make the recommendation along with the approval and the finding of facts that the CEO consider applying this condition
right.
to the actual small project plan approval process.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Definitely.
Are you with me, Michael, or are you not?
The issue that I'm having is how does the planning board determine that the financial and technical capacity subdivider has adequate financial and technical capacity to meet the standards of this section? Since the award hasn't been given.
Well, I guess it's the capacity to do what?
So
This is the-
that's, yeah, so
Maybe that's
what I'm talking about is
Okay.
that, like, what is the actual financial and technical capacity to perform a subdivision?
The answer is.
Well,
It's
is
the
it just
answer-
filing it?
It is, the answer is the cost of filing it at the registry of deeds, and you technically don't even need a survey, you can write it yourself.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the cost and the financial and technical capacity is something that
It's almost moot. at this point.
it is almost for just the subdivision. But for the project,
Oh, yeah, no, I
it's
hear
a different
what
thing.
what you're saying, and I think that that's fair. I'm just trying to think about it out of this context, away from this project, that if somebody comes in, just asks to subdivide.
Yep.
Then I guess this is a relatively light impact. As we've gone through everything else, traffic, erosion, there really isn't much else to mitigate. You're not proposing to build roads or anything like that. So I think that would be reasonable. If someone came in with like a larger subdivision, you might still want that was requiring sewers and roads and
Yeah.
everything else. Then
I
Right.
think it would be,
that
it
bar
would be
might be
doing that,
higher.
demonstrating that you're going to actually put all that infrastructure in place,
Mhm,
I think would be the thing that you'd be looking for, that you don't
Yeah.
want someone just to do a subdivision and not put the infrastructure.
right.
So that would probably be the difference.
Yeah.
Well, if
Yeah,
somebody,
in
for
what-
example, was gonna put, 7,500 units in a subdivision somewhere on a large parcel of land, this would be a different conversation
Yeah, and I'm thinking
because there's big infrastructure there.
well, but yes, and what you're talking about is with the units, but I'm even thinking if someone's going to carve up land, the code's going to require frontage along roads and things,
Mhm.
something like that. You have to have a certain amount of frontage.
Yeah.
For this application, you don't really need to put that road in to have all the lots be conforming. So there's no reason, if you've ignored everything else, there's not really a technical capacity to you need to be able to plat and build out a road to make sure that some of the lots are conforming.
Mm.
So here, all of the lots are going to be conforming. You don't need to even touch the land really to meet, I think, all of the standards, which we'll continue to go through, but I think that's fair. So yeah, I think it's a reasonable interpretation if that's how the board wants to go with that. So I will strike that. All right. So So then I think, assuming the board finds that the financial and technical capacity of the applicant is sufficient, then subsurface waters. No part of the proposed subdivision is within 250 feet of any wetland, great pond, or river. Likewise, this isn't going for shoreland approval, so that's good. Groundwater, I don't see any reason to expect that there's going to be an impact of the groundwater, quality of the groundwater. This is it's multifamily, but it's a residential and small scale project. No subsurface discharge. So I think that the groundwater should be sufficiently protected. Flood areas, again, no part of this is adjacent to any area identified by FEMA or even near any of the FEMA's flood map areas. Freshwater wetlands, again, it's not near any. All right, river, stream, or brook. None of that's within, abutting, or near the site. Stormwater. This one we discussed that stormwater management law that is referenced in the code. It's really for larger scale projects. If you're near, for the location of this project, as long as it's less than 1 acre, it doesn't apply, which this is not. I did note here, and we may want to discuss stormwater management interventions or how you're going to handle that, specifically for the driveway, to make sure that there's not water running off of the site from, even though it's not paved driveways, once you drive on it, it essentially turns into impervious or minimally pervious surface. So grading is going to be important, and I'm not sure. We discussed this, but I don't know if you have a solution of how you want to.
I don't have a detailed, the main DOT entrance permit also requires that it's not dumping water onto Mills Road.
Mhm.
So it's basically, best practices with grading and crowning. And I expect that they'll be using the areas on either side of the driveway to capture any excess water.
Yeah, which is an interesting item that I don't know if the board wants to discuss, or there is the DOT is not requiring any kind of culvert to go underneath the
Correct.
driveway, that apron there. But it is interesting. There was, I think, sewer and drainage there at some point. It has deteriorated to the point where it's not really existent anymore. I think normally a reasonable thing would be to grade the driveway so that all the water ran to the sides. And then even if it does run down the driveway, it would run into whatever ditch or drainage is next to the road or under the road.
There's an upcoming DOT project to rebuild the structured drainage on Mills Road. And in the new proposal that I saw, they've moved the structured drainage from that side to the other side of Mills Road with catch basins and cross culverts underneath Mills. You may see someday that they're going to put a little catch basin right there to the side of the thing and catch all your stormwater. That's on them.
They may do that someday.
They might do that someday. We've only been after them to do it for the past 15 years, so.
Haven't seen it yet.
Haven't seen it yet, but I did see an updated plan earlier in the summer, so
Okay. Oh,
we'll
great.
see if it actually happens.
That'd be nice.
And we can discuss, there's the VPI project is in the works, but this may also be included in sidewalks and any upgrades then. But we'll talk about that later. That's also just proposed. So I guess, yes.
One thing I would add is I think that I'll need to address this in my permit with the CEO for the road, roads and entrance ordinance. So.
Yep.
So I'm thinking maybe the best thing to do here is to just require that you'll meet any requirements that the DOT has for the driveway, since they also regulate stormwater runoff and things like that.
And unless they've changed yes, but unless they've changed their regulations, we developed our road driveways and entrances ordinance based on their standards.
Mhm.
So they should align.
Which, so that, I think if we direct and say that as long as you're in compliance with that, with those, then you should be in compliance here with stormwater. So I'm gonna just make it two. Okay. And I will update that. Spaghetti lots. There's no lot that is in here. I don't know if we want to discuss it. This one lot kind of does, you could consider a flag lot. I will say, when I looked at the definition for flag lots, it as long as you've got the minimum required frontage, that's this, just because it's shaped like a flag doesn't mean that it is a flag lot. So I just wanted to clarify that.
And that standard is about waterfront. The
Is it? No, the spaghetti
Are.
lots are.
The
Yes.
spaghetti
Yeah,
lots are,
that's true. Lake phosphorus concentration. Again, this is directed at subsurface water disposals, but so septic systems, but the long-term cumulative effects of the proposed subdivision shouldn't unreasonably increase the phosphorus concentration, since again, they're gonna be tied to the sewer. And you're not really near a great pond or any other body. So I think that should be pretty well managed. Impact on adjoining municipality. This is really not near the municipal boundaries and not large enough that I would imagine it's going to create any problem for the adjoining municipalities. And then finally, land subject to liquidation harvesting. As long as you're not proposing any harvesting of those trees, which we've discussed, you're kind of going the other direction here, kind of preserve them. I think that we should be able to meet this standard. So that is subdivision. Is there any reason, I don't know if you want to have any discussion on any of those standards further than what we've already done?
No, I think you were very thorough, honestly. And since the scope of our review is just limited to those items A through U, I think we've covered it.
You know, it's maybe a little interesting. We haven't really discussed the actual lots. They do conform to the,
And that's the
minimum
only
lots.
checkbox that subdivision requires. If they conform to the base zoning.
Yep.
That's it.
which they do. You know, at the table on page, whatever that page is, 1, 2, 3. The width is measured at the street. They're all 20 feet at least, except, well, including the kind of flag lot, which is exactly 20 feet. Lot area, there's no lot area minimum, there's no depth minimum. The building placement conforms, but that's not really relevant to site plan. So I don't see any reason really. I mean, we can go through it. Certainly, if you've gone through it and are satisfied, I think that we should be pretty good. I did include site standards in here just to be thorough. Like I said, use standards going through the CEO and the small project plan going through the CEO subdivision. So, the road driveway and entrance ordinance. The road driveways and entrance ordinance refers to an approving body. It does not specify who that approving body is. I took that to be that, or make sense that if the code enforcement officer is going to be doing the use and the small project plan, that roads, driveways, and entrance ordinance could be.
It was intended to match up to the level of review for the different types of project plans.
Yeah. So we may want to clarify that at some point, but I think for this application, it's not super red.
Yeah. So we're talking about under your conditions of approval on the last page, they're removing item 4.
Oh, the conditions. Yep, yep, yep. Okay, so approval of subdivision. So we will get rid of this.
So the rest of those are pretty standard. And honestly, those should just be included as, you know, you're gonna see those conditions on everything that comes from the planning board.
Yeah.
I mean, not the subdivision one specifically, but also
No deviations from the approved
mhm,
application.
it's pretty standard.
Yeah.
And then,
So
and
then, yeah, these
any
were the other
condition
ones.
that requires obviously that the whole project be approved by the CEO. Or the CEO's portion of the project be approved.
Yeah.
Mhm,
All right.
Pretty standard stuff.
So yeah, and then the decision of the planning board. Why don't I read through that and then you?
Yeah, I want you to read through that and then
Act
we'll open
on
it up for public.
All right, so the recommended decision of the planning board is in consideration of the submitted application of 10 Mills Road, Newcastle LLC, owner of the property, dated October 6th, 2023, and revised through October 19th, 2023, for the proposed project at 10 Mills Road, which is on tax map 13, lot 17-1, including staff review comments, public hearing testimony, and related materials contained in the record. The planning board of the town of Newcastle at a regular meeting held on today's date voted. Those are highlighted so that we can fill those in after the vote. To approve this application for a subdivision permit, no building permit will be issued for a new building until the final plat is recorded with the Lincoln County Registry of Deeds. The rest of these are really just kind of conditions and guidance. So
Most of that's lifted from the
yeah,
core zoning code,
pretty much all of it except for the conditions of approval.
right? The
A big
language, right?
copy and paster.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to have it in there. All right.
So-
So I think at this point, we'll open this for public hearing. We have an abutter or two present. If anyone would like to be recognized, come on up.
I just did.
You gotta come to the mic. I'm sorry. And unfortunately, gotta tell us who you are and where you live.
Louis Rector, 22 Mills Road.
Thank you, sir.
Lot, that would be lot 18. I have a culvert under my driveway. And I'm assuming the water would go down and he'd have to have a culvert under his entrance as well. Or otherwise it's gonna go out in the road.
So it's a good question. One of the things that we didn't really specify, we just said that it's gonna have to meet the criteria, but one of the things that the roads, driveways and entrances ordinance does
Mhm.
is it requires that the first portion, when you leave the main road,
Mhm.
have a negative pitch for a certain distance. And then after that, it can have a positive pitch so that any water that runs from the site would be collected and stay, whether there's a culvert or a catch basin or anything like that, would stay on that applicant's property and not spill into the roadway.
At the present time, it spills into the roadway.
It would have to be modified to
Okay.
conform. Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and my other question is, he's gonna do 2 buildings close to those trees at the road. And if you don't pass this, he doesn't get his loan. Is that correct?
We don't decide the loan. It's the applicant's applying to a program through Maine Housing. So even if the board does approve this, there's no guarantee that the applicant's going to get awarded the grant. So
It's a highly competitive program, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I,
No guarantees that that would fail to.
okay.
Yeah.
I just thought that, really, I didn't know how the loan thing worked.
Yeah.
Okay, and I didn't know the town got involved in helping people get loans or how that whole thing worked.
Yeah. This isn't so much the board, but this is me as the town planner. I've been working with property owners to help, I guess, go through the process
Mhm.
so that hopefully everything that comes to the board is like, pretty straightforward and makes sense and all the questions are answered. But also one of the things that, yes, the feedback I've been getting from town officials is housing's in short supply, and anything that we can do to increase housing supply is, like working with developers to increase that supply would be a good thing. So, assuming it's in conformity with the core zoning code and any of the other ordinances and the comprehensive plan. So, I have been offering my help as much as I can, but
So these buildings will be under code for height and everything.
oh yeah,
And be the same as the other houses in the neighborhood. Nothing
No.
out of the ordinary.
right. I think they'll, I mean, there's a variety of houses there, so to say that will be the same, can't say that, but they will meet all of the codes for the town of Newcastle. Height, massing, setbacks, all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you
no
very
problem.
much. Does anybody else have anything else? Public comment? Come on up, sir.
Hi, my name is Frank Smith, 24 Mills Road. Just saw this plan for the first time tonight. Big concern, the drainage system from Stewart Street to the intersection of 215 and 1B, for all practical purposes, is a failed system. I don't think it's news to anybody. Every house from that point to that intersection has a culvert under their driveway.
Mhm.
And they're all plugged. And when you have a heavy rain, all that water in sheet form winds up out in the street. This time of year is not such a big problem. In the wintertime, the margin between the pavement and people's lawns and the alleged sidewalk that's there, it's like quicksand. So I don't see how you're going to build this building or buildings and without affecting the drainage of that area going towards Academy Hill. The other thing that I didn't see addressed tonight was parking. Simple numbers at approximately, excuse me, I got something in my throat, about 2.5 people per unit. You're going to have about 40 people living on that land, or you could have. That is changing the demographic of that neighborhood substantially. People from, just say from there to, not counting the people that are in that old school, there's less than a dozen people there. Most of those houses only have 1 or 2 people. The demographic is older. So now you're introducing something into this that is not here. I've read your zoning code. You profess in your code that you do not want to make changes, or drastic changes. You're interested in development in a place that walking distance to the central part of town. That's certainly doable there, but if you have 40 people and just say you have 30 cars, there's no on-street parking whatsoever. And with the drainage being what it is, forget it. So you can't even park a truck temporarily in the daytime hours on that street and not cause a traffic problem. So it doesn't matter whether anybody did a traffic count or not. It would to introduce that density of parking demand in that little area. We put quite a stress on there. And I think you'd be remiss in not having a formal traffic count at this time. That's pretty much all I have to say, but I just think that, you know, it's only a 1 acre or 1.2 acre site. And to put that amount of people on it, I think it needs a lot of forethought and study.
Thank you very much. I'll just say a couple of things.
Okay.
Because I love everything you said, and honestly, I'm not joking at all when I say that I have been working on this for a long time, specifically Mills Road.
I'm not saying that the town doesn't need affordable housing and
Oh, no, no, no.
and it has some nobility in its cause.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about the drainage and the sidewalk issue. And
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, that you brought up in the parking, because so the weird thing about Mills Road that I didn't understand for growing up here, I didn't understand for a long time, was it's a state road.
yes,
And so the town doesn't have control over it at all.
the state of Main treats it like it's a back road.
And therein lies our problem.
Yeah.
So years ago, I said, look, we've really got to get that sidewalk rebuilt. And the answer from the DOT was basically, no, that's our road. We put in the sidewalk, but we're not going to maintain it. And if you maintain it, then we're just going to give it to you and you're going to have it in perpetuity. And we said, oh,
But
that's going to be
but-
crazy expensive.
but there's not one traffic or one street light for hundreds of thousands of yards. So, you know, you walk from that intersection back towards Stewart Street and if somebody falls and gets hurt, who's on the hook for it?
I've asked that question too.
This is a very litigious society we live in right now. People will sue
completely
you at the drop of a hat.
Sure.
So,
I don't disagree with anything you say. The best that I can say is that there are several people in town that have an interest in improving the conditions on Mills Road and have been working on it for years.
well, there are people out there that have recently purchased homes and put huge amounts of money into it. So the place is on the upswing,
Mm.
but you know, you know, you can't take a safe walk to downtown without falling on your face. And I've witnessed people falling.
Yeah.
There's a blind lady who walks down that street,
Sure.
you know, a couple times a week.
Yeah.
With a cane. I mean, she, you know, I don't know how she does it.
I don't know. I've seen her.
Yeah.
So you just might be interested. Michael mentioned it earlier. The DOT has a program called the Village Partnership Initiative.
Yeah.
And the town of Newcastle has applied to do a VPI, Village Partnership Initiative, to work with the DOT to address the conditions at that intersection and the surrounding area.
I
If
mean,
you're interested,
yes,
please come be involved with that process when it finally starts going. We'll be having
I don't have a problem being, I'm retired. I got all the time in the world.
great. That's fantastic. So
But on the other side of that is though, you're also looking at the most compromised traffic intersection for miles around.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, are we exacerbating that problem? Has anybody looked at that?
a lot of people are looking at that.
And that's all part of this village partnership initiative. The
Yeah.
project is to,
Well, I'm just saying,
Hills,
ir-
that
irrespective of this subdivision, that intersection needs to be
Yeah.
addressed. All
oh
right.
yeah,
Yes.
So just for the safety of the people that live in this town.
oh yeah.
So, you know, adding 20 or 30 cars that in and out of there in, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning, you know,
Right.
kind of stuff. It's going to be severe.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of getting off track, but
But it's,
that
but it's,
intersection is the reason that we applied for the Village Partnership Initiative.
okay.
So they're gonna, I think they're in the process of, you were gonna update us on.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'll update maybe at the end.
Are you gonna stick around?
What's in it for me?
Well, we're gonna get an update on that VPI at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah.
if you're interested,
Well, I bummed a ride, but yeah, I'll stick
Oh,
around as long as
okay,
my ride
well.
is. Yeah.
if you leave your email with Michael, he can stay in contact with you and let you know when things are happening.
Okay. I can do that.
All right.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. Any other comments about the proposed subdivision? All right. Seeing none, we'll move into approval. Is there anything else we need to consider before we take action on this? From the applicant, I know the town attorney is here and just arrived and has been following the situation.
Yeah, I've,
Microphone, if you can.
I was in a, sorry, I was in an all-day deposition, so I'm kind of tired. So I was asked a specific question by the applicant, and I communicated a few minutes with Ben today about it, but so there was a question about whether or not conditional approvals are final approvals for the purpose of appeals. I looked throughout case law, and there is not a good answer. There hasn't been a case challenging that issue.
Can we just,
Yeah.
real quick,
Sure.
just specify what we're talking about in terms of what you mean by conditional?
Well, so
approval?
there was, so the applicant, who's former selectman Rob Nelson, just, reached out to me. Unfortunately, people, they can find me despite my best attempts to hide. And he asked a question, and so I briefly communicated with Ben to make sure that it's something that you guys, we're talking about. And the condition would be, if you had to premise an application based on the financial ability of the applicant based on a loan, when does that permit become unappealable? Okay. And so the answer to that question is probably the normal appeal period after the vote, but it's still an open question of law. So it's potentially 30 days after that loan is granted. So this doesn't come up much on the financial aspect. Usually it's something else, like a fire department letter saying, yeah, the building, has the right kind of entrances for fire code, or, a water district letter saying, yeah, there's enough water. But in this case, where it was integral to the application, my read of the law is that it's not a clear answer. And so my advice to the town would be, determine if you, or as the planning board, determine if you really have to see the loan in print before you determine there's basically the financial wherewithal to do the project. Or alternatively, find that the applicant has the financial wherewithal based on the fact that he can't move forward at all on the project without the loan. But if he moves forward with the project, he has to complete it according to the terms of the loan. Under this program with Maine, they don't just give you a pile of money. They basically fund you in like 10% increments, and they have literally someone going to your buildings and checking and dispersing only the work you've done. It's actually tighter than any private bank I've ever dealt with, and I've done a lot of commercial transactions over the last 20 years. So I think that, my advice would be to go with the second option. If you have to find that, if that's your stumbling block, you may decide there are, multiple other things that, aren't meeting the conditions or whatever. But if it's the financial aspect, I would look at it as, how does the project move forward financially? If it gets the loan and happens, does the loan constitute enough money to do the project? And if so, I would find that substantial in terms of meeting the financial capability.
So that
Project.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic information.
Yeah.
I think, and before you got here, what we were talking about a little bit when we got to that section item K was that since what we're doing tonight is just the subdivision approval, not the project approval,
Okay.
that we kind of punted that
that's
financial
fine.
feasibility to the CEO, who will be reviewing it as a small project plan.
Okay.
So it's not going to be part of the conditions of this approval, because this is just for the subdivision.
For subdivision. Gotcha. Okay.
But I think the research that you've done would be good to take to when the application is actually filed for the small project plan, after it's platted and created as a subdivision, the town planner and the CEO and you should sit down and, all understand how that works.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm happy, I know all of the details now of the way that the program works. I've looked into all of it. So I'm happy to, write an opinion about that for the town. If it gets to that stage.
Sure, okay. It does, I mean, it seems like a bit of a chicken and the egg thing because
Yeah,
most of the people who are doing this can only do it if they get the money.
Right.
If they are awarded the grant.
Well-
But to be able to prove for the town that you can do it without needing the grant seems ridiculous.
well, and here's the other aspect of it. The state is only granting the money if you personally guarantee the entire amount of money. So you are riding a personal guarantee through the occupancy permit. So basically, if an applicant does the project and, they failed to complete, they have two choices. They can either give back all the money the state has already given them, lose everything they have up to that amount of money,
Mhm.
or get, take their own personal money and finish the project. Third option is the only real option. So that's how the state has written the documents, and they're exceedingly precise.
Okay.
So,
Not to scare anyone away
Oh,
from
no.
doing a project or anything.
Yeah.
But,
no, it'll be fine.
but
no worries.
it's good to know that the way that the project or the main housing has structured it is not just here, have a bunch of money.
No, absolutely not. No, they have, it's very interesting. They have a guy named Chris Devlin, who is the attorney now for Maine Housing. And my only experience with Chris Devlin prior to this is he wrote literally the book, Commercial Closings in Maine.
Love it.
It's a book I've been using for 20 years.
That's fantastic.
And so I, when I called to ask him a few questions, I said, hey, I use your book all the time. He's like, second edition is coming out next year. So,
That's great.
but anyway, no. So yeah, I just want to let you know that, my research was, along those lines. And so, I'm not opining on the project. I'm not saying, that the rest of the conditions are met or whatever for subdivision, but I'm just saying as to that question.
No, the legality of how approvals work is always important. So thank you.
For sure. Any other questions while I'm here?
I think we covered everything else for the subdivision review.
Can I just, since you're here, can I
Yeah.
make sure that I'm clear? It sounds like what you're saying is it's unclear. It probably is not an issue. Like the appeals period probably starts from the decision of the planning board.
Mhm.
But that's unclear. And if you wanted to cross all of your T's and dot all your I's and make sure that it's, solid, to try to avoid that kind of the condition of.
Well, moreover, Chris basically said, if Maine can't check off the box that you have all the approvals and they're complete,
Mhm.
they won't give you the money.
Mhm.
So, but you're not talking about any condition on an approval. So that's not what you're talking about.
No, I am. That is what I'm saying.
Well, no, what I'm saying is we have some other conditions on the approval that Michael's prepared for us if we approve it, that say things like no deviations from the approved application are permitted unless such changes are approved.
Oh yeah, no, those are fine. No,
Those are standard
yeah, those things are fine.
conditions of
Yeah.
approval. Another one that says, this subdivision plan is contingent upon the review and approval of a use permit review by the code enforcement officer.
Yeah,
Those
no,
are
no.
standard sort of.
Those are fine. But if there was like, let's say that you had a water district letter, let's say it was site plan, right? Not subdivision.
Yeah.
So let's say you were doing a site plan, and it was commercial property. If you had a water district letter that said you have to meet, this number of, gallons for a hotel,
Mhm.
both supply and waste.
Yes.
Whenever that letter arrives is the day you start counting your 30, potentially.
Yeah.
And so the key about this program is you can't get the money for the financial capacity until you have a permit that says that you can do it. And so it's kind of it's a chicken and the egg problem.
Mhm.
But like I said, I mean, you can't, the way that the structuring, I mean, it's way tighter, way tighter than a regular mortgage. Like in a regular mortgage, the bank, says, oh yeah, we'll pay the contractor in thirds to build the house. This is literally a guy goes out like every couple of weeks to see how much you've gotten done. And they take pictures and stuff. And if it hasn't progressed, they're like, no money. So it's called Maine Housing Construction Services. And it's a whole little group within Maine Housing that literally oversees everything so they don't waste any state money.
I just wanted to be clear how we were speaking about the terminology of conditions and approvals.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
And I think we're clear as mud.
Okay. Yeah, no, but other conditions like that, or if they're achievable through a means that doesn't preclude their approval.
Mhm.
Right? So, if you couldn't do a floor plan until the fire chief signed off on your floor plan.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
So that would be the same sort of problem, but
Yeah.
that's not what you have here. But
No,
that's what the concern is. So
Great.
Yeah. Okay. If you guys have no other issues,
I think we're good. If
Yeah.
Michael, you're good.
I think I am, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. how many have you done tonight? Were you
This is the
start-
first one.
Okay, you started 7, right?
6:30.
Oh, 6:30, sorry. Did you have any questions on the second one?
We haven't gotten there yet, and
Okay.
we're not doing the application. It's a pre-submittal meeting.
Oh, okay, good.
You're
All right.
welcome to stay and chit chat,
I'm gonna go home.
or you can go home and have
exhausted.
dinner.
I was in Portland 8 to 7.
Oh, that's a
Or
long
8 to
day.
6.
Well, thank you for stopping by. All right, so
Good night.
I think we have dotted and crossed and flogged as much as we need to on this one, so if we're ready, I would say, did you give us language?
Uh,
No,
no,
that's okay.
but I guess it would be along the lines of moving to approve the application and finalize the application for subdivision and finalize the findings of fact and conclusions of law
As we've discussed tonight.
as discussed.
All right, so moved.
So, okay, move.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes 4-0.
Or not. And Kevin, you were the second.
Yep.
Okay,
Great.
and
All right.
that closes the public
And that
meeting.
closes the public hearing on that subdivision application.
I will work with George and be in touch with you to get everything else in line.
Okay. Yeah.
Just before we get to Xander's, I just quickly, because I wanted to, the VPI project, to update the board
Yeah, sure.
briefly. We are going to, the VPI project is, like Ben mentioned, it's a village partnership initiative, where Maine DOT works with towns to do projects. The project that Newcastle is working on, still very early stages, is to address basically Main Street and the intersection in front of the public house at with Mills Road, and then down what's like River Road, I guess, or
The
it's
interchange between the off ramp and River Road.
yeah, so down to where the on-ramp starts, there, that intersection as well. So that basically from the bridge to the on-off ramp. Redesign, it's going to include some of Mills Avenue. It's going to be streetscape parking. The stage where we're at right now is we're going out to RFP. We've already been accepted into the program. We've got our scope of work finalized and approved by DOT, and we need to put an RFP out for pre-engineering services, which is essentially just to study that area, figure out what the existing conditions are, what the traffic counts are, and then we can start moving towards what are possible solutions. So an RFP, which is done, drafted, select board, I believe, is going to discuss it at their meeting Monday. And if they give the go ahead, we'll make that public. I would expect that we will that will close early December. We should have a contractor selected by the end of the year. And we can start doing all that work. So part of that is sidewalks, potentially drainage. Well, this is potential on Mills Road as well as that area in downtown.
So I would say if you're interested, come to the select board meeting this coming Monday night, which starts at 7 PM. It'll be on their agenda.
Separate from the BPI.
Come on up. Sorry. Thank you guys for coming.
Separate from the, oh, you might be interested, separate from the BPI, isn't Maine DOT also have some plan for work on the drainage on Mills Road?
Yes, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I
that's a
didn't-
completely separate project.
That's, yeah,
Yes,
okay, I'm not sure if he,
he probably didn't, but
okay, that's, okay.
hopefully they'll make that clear on Monday night.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So
And-
there's reason to believe something will happen or the BPI. has
Oh.
results.
Interesting. Yeah.
Potentially.
And that's,
I don't hold any hope on that.
that's stormwater
That, yeah,
is what you're talking. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's just structured drainage. actually.
Right, yeah, that's,
That's what they're
but I mean,
talking
that's not a sewage or,
No, it's just runoff. Yeah.
okay.
Okay,
So-
great. Let's move on. New business. We have a pre-submittal meeting, tax map 012 lot 011 38 Academy Hill, applicant Z83 LLC.
Actually, 38. Not 83.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I think that's my
Dyslexia.
typo.
oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I-
that's no big.
I read it right, right?
You
You
did read
did.
it right. Yeah.
You did it. You
It's
did.
just- That's okay.
Corrected.
Great. So tell us a little bit about your project that you want to do. And I understand, I'll just set the stage real quick because we're talking a lot about the same things we just talked about because you're going for the same rural
Well,
housing program.
yeah, not necessarily though. I'm not creating a subdivision. For one thing.
We will
So-
talk about the technicalities there. You're right. He's not dividing his lot.
I'm not.
Right.
I'm not going for a subdivision, and to be quite honest, I was talking about this project with George Chase.
Mhm.
Before any of this state money came to be. He actually, I was asking him to take a look at my project and he actually mentioned to me that the state might be doing an initiative of, giving people money for apartments.
Right.
To rent. So
Right.
it's a little bit similar to, but it's also a little bit different than the one we talked about tonight earlier.
Mhm.
So, that being said, I have been working with Michael Martone and George Chase. More on, just town stuff and not state stuff so much. I also have Ethan Sewell, who should be on. Is he on?
He is a
I am on. Can you guys hear me okay?
There we go.
Yep.
Good.
Okay,
I'm walking someone to his cottage and I will be right back with everybody in 2 seconds. So
Yeah,
sorry, but I'm
you're-
here and listening.
you're fine, Ethan. I just thought I'd mention that you were here. All right. Ethan has been helping me on some of the technical stuff with this project and he's been very helpful. But basically what I'd like to do is get a permit to build a apartment building on 38 Academy Hill Road, which is a piece of property that I already own. And like I said, I've been working on this for maybe a year and a half or so.
I've
and-
got one of the documents that you sent me
Yep.
digitally. If you want me to share it on the screen,
Yeah, you can.
That
It's
way.
fine. Yep.
do that.
There we go.
So
Yep.
can you get?
Yep.
Can you see that? Oh, you. But I
I've
also
got it
shared
on my
right?
screen.
Yeah, we have it on our on our laptops. Yep. Cool.
This is Melissa Shaw. She's my assistant. She keeps me in line, as you can see. So this building is 40 by 120. My thought was to give a 3-bedroom apartment with 1 full bath and plenty of room for a kitchen and living room. Was that I have an apartment above my shop that's on 38 Academy Hill already. And although it's nice, it's 2 bedrooms and it's a little bit on the small side. So if you have 4 apartments on each level of this apartment building, they're 30 by 40 apartments, giving it 1,200 square feet. And I have an existing apartment above my shop that is 900 square feet, 2-bedroom. So going from that, I wanted to create something that was a little bit more spacious for tenants. Now, moving along with talking to Michael about this project, it was originally going to be 4 stories with a flat roof. But I think we had discussed a 5th floor might be possible if I had an actual, roof line, a gable roof with pitch. So that's why I changed the 5th story to be having the dustpan dormers and that making it 5 stories. The basement is going to have a laundry service. The tenants will get a discount, but anybody can drop their laundry off probably through a chute on the outside of the building and get it back in a reasonable amount of time, all laundered and rebagged and repacked and ready for pickup. I think this was just a small way to give the apartments just that little bit more room and not having to have a washer and dryer in every apartment, which having 18 apartments, 18 sets of washer and dryers can be problematic. And then moving on to what George, Chase and I had talked about regarding the state. He said something to me as we were walking around my property one day that the state might be giving so many dollars for every apartment. I thought it sounded fantastical and kind of amazing, but I doubted it, honestly. But it is true. The state is now trying to give people money, builders such as myself, money to create apartments for areas that need apartments, that need places for people to stay. And this is definitely one of those places. So, that being said, does anybody have any questions other than what I've said so far?
No, I think that's a great introduction. I might, you got a question?
I got a question on that basement level.
Yeah,
There's also about half of it is storage units. Is that it for the tenants or is that like self-storage business?
it could be either or. I think having a place for tenants to be able to store stuff outside of their apartments is a good thing.
Mhm.
Kind of like the decks that I put on there. They didn't, this building had no decks. And I think having a little space outside of the apartment, to be able to use your hibachi or whatever is good. I think having some storage for the tenants is good. And if it was big enough to do some other dry storage, it could be that too.
Mm.
Yep. But having enough room for mechanicals is ideal as well. Yep.
So, Michael, do you want to walk us through the sort of the conversations you guys have been having and your thoughts about, obviously we're not reviewing anything. There's no
No.
application. We're just,
Nope.
we're having a
Yeah.
conversation about ideas about the project, which is cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool project.
I'm glad to have this time.
Yeah.
Yep. To answer any questions or what.
Yeah, so I mean, that's essentially what Xander's said is true.
Yep.
Um,
The state has pointed me in a few directions that I wouldn't have gone, honestly. And if the state thing doesn't work out, then I may change this a little bit, but like the building has to be 100% electrical for heat and cooling. And they are mandating that there's places outside the building in the parking areas and alongside the building for future hookups for electric vehicles. The chargers don't have to be there, just the ability to put the chargers there.
So, and this isn't part of the code, but for the rural housing program, and it's the same with the previous applicant, Rob's project as well, is you have to run conduit for solar and electric vehicle hookups. You don't have to put the equipment in, but they want it there so that,
In case it works.
right, right. So that I guess would have to be included if you
Yeah.
were to go through that program.
Through the state, yeah.
Yeah. So for, I guess, a little bit of context, which the planning board, I imagine you all already know, but being in the fabrication, the special district fabrication housing, one of the permitted uses and mixed use buildings, it has to be mixed use. One of the issues that came up and we've discussed is how much commercial is required to meet that one unit of commercial.
Before we get there, can I just ask, how much square footage are we talking about total?
So
Is it a large project plan? It's over 10,000?
it's
yeah, it
large,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the planning board is gonna have to approve. He's gonna have to at least review this
Okay. Yeah. I was
for
just
use and
wondering where it would fall. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, 30 by 40, times floor, you're almost at 5,000 square feet per floor.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
times 5. So,
Yeah. Okay. So it's a good sized building.
oh, and the other thing I should mention is while technically it's not a subdivision because the lot isn't being divided, though the way that Maine used to define subdivisions were if you're dividing land if from into more than 3 lots, or if you're creating more than 3 dwelling units. They have changed that, so the number creating multifamily housing does not go through, isn't considered a subdivision now. But the Newcastle code still has that language in there. So my recommendation is we go through the motions that it is a subdivision, which essentially just means this meeting, pre-application meeting. And we can review it for subdivision. We'll have to change, actually, that's on one of the later agenda items. So that's one of the reasons coming before the planning board would be for subdivision approval, even though it's not.
Doesn't
I've
need
got
to come to state.
something to throw onto that fire. And something I hadn't talked to you yet about and really just came up recently. And that is, I think I'm going to relocate my business and actually sell the entire lot to Z40. We're going to do Z40 LLC or whatnot, but it's going to make it so that we take 2 of the apartments out of this building and leave the existing one in my shop and create another one on the first floor. And that way, the whole lot is the same use. That makes sense.
Okay.
That way it's all gonna be one lot.
Right.
It won't be separated in 2 pieces.
Okay.
Um,
We,
and there's a couple of reasons that Ethan and I decided to go that way, and he can explain a little more too.
I could chime in a tiny bit. That's okay.
Yeah.
My name is Ethan Sewell. I'm Xander's partner. I'm joining from Watertown, Massachusetts.
Business, business.
Sorry, business partner. So, yeah, Z40 is going to be a nonprofit organization. The mission of Z40 will be to promote community health and wellness while providing high quality, affordable, sustainable housing to residents of Maine. So, and the reason why we're going to donate or sell/donate the whole plot of land is partially because of Maine housing scoring criteria. They want to see reuse or repurposing of existing buildings, but also we're going to have, like Xander said, 2 units in his shop and 16 units in this building.
Gives us a little more availability to make more usage out of the building space than.
Yeah, it makes for quite a bit more commercial space overall.
so the only other thing I wanted to mention is these are 3-bedroom units, right?
Yep.
I know you mentioned compared to with Rob, 1-bedroom, which isn't better or worse. There's a mix of units though that are coming, that are proposed, which is great.
Right.
Yep, the family can hopefully live.
Yeah.
So-
live in one apartment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to jump on anybody's, but I love it. The only I'm trying to jive it with the code here, and a couple of things that just stood out to me. 2 things. One was that in that district, in the fabrication district, there is no building type that is strictly just residential. So we don't have a multi-unit residential building that's allowed there. We do have 2 building types that would meet the size criteria of what you're looking to do. One is a mixed use building, the other is a multi-unit commercial building. But what you're proposing to do is primarily residential units. So the mixed use building fits better.
Right.
But the question is, what is a mixed use building? And how much of the building is commercial versus how much of the building is residential for it to actually qualify as being a mixed use building, right? So I think that's part of the conversation that we need to have in thinking about the project and the district in particular. And when I saw the building, I was like, I think that'd be an awesome addition to the fabrication district. But then I went and I read the description and the purpose of that district on page 36 of the core zoning code. I'll just read it so that we all have it. The description says the fabrication special district allows a mix of industrial, office, retail, live, work, flex spaces, and other supporting development. And there's 3 purposes listed. The first one says to accommodate more intensive industrial uses in a way that is compatible with and in proximity to higher density residential areas. Second one says to support existing industrial uses and provide an area for their expansion. And the third one says to allow for residential uses that are compatible with industrial activities. So I don't want to say that residential buildings are not allowed at all, or residential units are not allowed at all. But I do get from the description of the district that the focus is to encourage those fabrication type elements more than just residential units. So the question I think that we have to ask you is, how are we going to, from a plain faced, perspective, say that what we're doing is proposing the construction of a very large mixed use building, and what portion of that building is going to be used for commercial purposes and what portion is going to be used for residential purposes? Because on the face of it, it looks like 100% of it is going to be residential, which
No,
wouldn't be
It's not.
possible.
no,
Yeah.
No.
that's not, no, that's not. The purpose is to have it mixed use. And I think the only question is, how much commercial space does there need to be versus residential?
Sure.
And I think, and I'm not sure if it was just an off the cuff thing or whether you actually looked it up, Michael, and you didn't see where, what percent each was, and the commercial percentage you came up with was pretty small.
Well, at least from my reading, it doesn't actually specify. It doesn't say one way or the other what,
Right.
how large the commercial unit has to be or what the mix is.
What his drawings show, correct me if I'm wrong, is about 20%. You take one floor out of the 5.
Yeah.
Which is laundromat and storage. Are those considered
Sorry.
Well,
commercial?
I mean, maybe
that's-
what we should do is because I was just looking at your plan for the first floor. It looks like for the front half of it is inventory, office, corridor, storage. So is that a business?
Can I chime in again?
Yeah.
So this has been obviously a concern of ours for a little while, because at the beginning we were concerned that Maine Housing would not want commercial, whereas we knew that the town wanted commercial. So we've been trying to find the balance, and we've done our homework with Maine Housing, and it turns out that they're okay with commercial space, particularly if you do it the way we are planning to do it. These are our most current plans, but in our conceptualization of the building right now, we're thinking of putting 4 units on each of floors 1 through 4, and then keeping the entire 5th floor to be commercial in keeping with the mission of the nonprofit in promoting health and wellness. So there would be a resident lounge up there, but it could also be a function room. So people could come and hire it out to have their holiday parties. Companies could come and do that. And they would be on the 5th floor and have this amazing view. It would be really cool. There will be therapy rooms that therapists can rent out on the 5th floor also. Like therapists with different specializations who don't have room, they can come in at subsidized rates. They can get their therapy site there. The other place, so there's that whole 5th floor. And then in the basement right now, we have the laundromat, which is commercial. And then we also are planning to put in a kind of like a heated yoga room and have yoga classes down there in keeping with the mission of promoting health and wellness. There'll be locker rooms. It could be like a fitness club for people where the residents would have subsidized access to it, just like Xander mentioned with the laundry. And then outside people could get a membership as long as we know what our capacity is for having as many members. Then the last bit of commercial space is in the shop, which is the second building that we saw in the survey. There will be the so the big building is going to be 16 3-bedroom units. In the shop outside, it'll be 2 2-bedroom units. And the rest of the space in the shop is going to become a commercial kitchen, which can be used for various, commercial efforts. And so that's kind of where we're at with the commercial space idea, which is, I think that's an incredibly large amount of square footage dedicated to commercial space.
Yeah. It just wasn't really, it wasn't shown that way on the plans very well.
Yeah, because it's still changing, it's still evolving a little bit, but we're very close.
Because it was, it was a week ago, we went to go talk to the folks in the state of Maine. In
Yeah.
Augusta. And we found out a bunch of stuff.
We got a lot of information that helped us out a lot.
That's cool. Yeah, they had that informational meeting, right? For
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and they have the Genesis Fund is giving technical assistance to developers, and that's invaluable. The one
Yeah.
thing that popped into my mind about our earlier conversation about the appeals period, right? I think that in Maine Housing's thing, they say that it's 20 points for readiness for all of this, or 18 points or something. And then if the time period for all appeals has expired, you get an additional 2 points. So that question of when does that appeals period begin is a very relevant question, because they want you to have all the permits, everything. And they want a letter from Newcastle saying that there's no question, the permits are good. And then if all of the period of appeals is expired, then the developer gets an additional 2 points. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and that's, if anybody's wondering about points, the state uses the point system to tell who gets the money and how much of the money.
Right.
Right. So it's a constant, like, give or take to try and get the points.
Right.
As many points.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of interest in the program, and it's very competitive, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And again, we'll see what happens. And if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, there is another period of in June
Yes.
of 24
Come
that
back.
you can go again. Yep. So anyway, yep, I think it's a good building for the area. I think the area is a good place for the building.
We have a catchment basin.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we have a catchment basin. Yep. Thanks to the Newcastle drainage project.
When Academy Hill was redone.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had to fight for that catchment basin to be put back, but I got it.
Good.
So as far as drainage goes, it's a good spot for drainage. The backside of the building will probably drain into the railroad bed there. That whole drainage system's just been totally redone. And it's all dry there. It's where it's been wet forever right there off Academy Hill into the ditches of the railroad.
Yeah.
It's now all dry.
Yeah. Good.
So
Good.
yeah, that's basic. That's everything in a nutshell.
So the other thing none of this is set in stone, but I'm just looking at the pictures, right?
Yeah.
There it is. All right, scroll back up here. Is that we got, I know these were probably just thrown in for whatever, but we would have what's drawn as a parking lot. And so that would, based on the number of cars, I think if it's over 10 and you're making an actual parking lot, I only mention this, you just got to follow that section of the core zoning code.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I think the building itself conforms. The only question I have is, have you thought about the idea of having the commercial use on the ground floor and the apartment on the top floor?
Yep.
Okay.
Could be either way.
Yeah. I only mention that because in other districts where mixed use building types are all allowed to be built.
Yeah.
The strong preference in the code and in the comp plan is to have those commercial uses on the ground floor available and easily accessible for the general public. If there's going to be commercial activity in that mixed use building, which is a requirement, right? And so if you considered like flipping it, and having the spaces on that ground floor, because I think you said you were going to have like some of the commercial activity like on the fifth floor under the eave. I think that's something to think about.
Yeah, I think commercial, active ground floor, and especially what's near the street, will probably be better, just like planning wise.
How much did we answer the question of how much commercial space?
No, we haven't. I mean, we haven't. The code doesn't say specifically what you have to do, but
Okay.
I think that. So I think it's a conversation with about the building, right?
Yeah.
It's probably unreasonable. Not that you're doing this at all, but as an example, if you're proposing a mixed use building, it's probably unreasonable to say, well, that closet is the commercial space and the rest of it is residential space.
Oh,
'Cause
come
that-
on.
Why can't we do
Why
that?
is that?
I mean, it just doesn't.
You can't put a whole lot of equipment in.
That's
Right?
It just doesn't meet the the comp plan in terms of what the comp plan is striving to have.
Yeah.
Which is that sort of walkable like neighborhood and businesses on that ground floor.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say that we would necessarily need to set a percentage, but I think that we could strongly encourage you to consider at least having the ground floor that faces that new parking lot be, commercial space.
Hmm.
Maybe the back of that ground floor isn't necessary to be commercial space, but I would think in keeping with how the requirements of mixed use buildings in other districts would be, having that first half of the ground floor that faces the parking lot where you park and walk right in, whether it's offices, yoga studio, health and
Makes
wellness
sense.
center,
Makes
whatever
sense.
it is,
For traffic reasons.
for traffic reasons.
Yep.
And that way people don't have to get in an elevator and go up to access the
Right.
the
And then
community.
get out at a certain floor.
Right.
By accident.
Yeah. And you have people wandering your building.
We do appreciate that very much. And that's why the current plans show that, that it has that commercial space on the first floor in this set of plans. And that's the way we've always thought of it. It was me, I admit, it was me who said, if we stack them 4 on top of 4, those first 4 floors, that gives us the whole 5th floor to design this amazing kind of space. But we will absolutely take that into consideration, think about it. We'll put our heads back to it and try to make sure, because it makes sense to me too, what you say. Put it on this floor, because that's where commercial stuff is in general, right?
Yeah.
We will absolutely think as hard as we possibly can about that. And also the commercial space in his shop, in the current shop, is going to be right on that ground level.
Yeah, right, sure. Yeah, but that's a physically separate building. Like it is going to be its own mixed use building. So it'll be 2 mixed use buildings. This new proposed big one and the one that you currently have that's going to get rehabbed.
Right.
Right.
Except the state will see it as 18 apartments on the site.
Well, yeah, it's all part of the same project.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just saying for the purposes of how
Commercial.
it's considered in the code,
Yep.
our code,
Yep.
it would be 2 mixed use buildings. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it would work. I think it would totally work.
Yeah, and I think for the building in isolation, recognizing would have pretty amazing views from that top 5th floor. I think that, I totally understand it, but I think if you think about the neighborhood and that street generally, having commercial space on the ground floor that faces the road and the parking lot, I
Yeah.
think would be
Makes sense. to
better
me.
for the context rather than, not to say that it wouldn't be awesome to have commercial
Right.
space up there, but
Right. Depending on what it was.
The
So-
original plan, sorry, Z, go ahead.
No, so I guess what I would like to know, if it's possible
Mhm.
tonight, is what are we looking for space if we have, let's say there was 25,000 square feet, 5 floors. It's less than that. Would we say that 5,000 square feet out of that would be commercial?
I don't know that we have to put a number on it. I'm looking at it from the perspective of someone who may be driving up to the building, parking in front of it to go inside and access a business.
Yep.
And so I don't think we need to put necessarily a number on it, but from the perspective of being that pedestrian on the street, in the parking lot, being able to just walk straight into a business, I would suggest that you consider the front half of the ground floor be those commercial spaces.
I've seen other people in the town do it that way.
Yeah. Well, so exactly. And I think, but you know all the stories.
Well, what we planned for that actually, and if we, after we finish tonight, when we go back and we put our heads back to it, there's a very good chance we will go right back to our original plan, which was to have that first floor commercial space be a small food market / convenience store / lunch and breakfast counter. Kind of like Rennie's, has that, how they redid their counter there recently, something along those lines, or something like a very nice general store with that counter right there.
That's cool. That's a cool idea.
Because then you get
I hadn't heard that.
the Lincoln Academy kids, they don't have to go all the way to town. They can just come down to there. Boom.
Yeah.
That was one of Ethan's original plans. So then he got sidetracked and we were thinking about how awesome that 5th floor would be, but I think it makes a lot of sense to be commercial space on the first floor for all
We'll
of
try to do half of the first, what we would end up doing would be half of the first floor, half of the 5th floor, and half of the basement would all be commercial.
Yeah. I mean, we can't say for certain, oh yeah, we approve until we see the application.
No.
But I mean, I think that to me sounds like that would meet a reasonable expectation for the definition of a mixed use building. It's not the closet. It's not 50-50. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
But I think a reasonable amount of commercial space that's easily accessible from the public is a good, like you're describing, is a good way to go about it. Also, I will add, and I hadn't heard that idea before you had about a general store, but when I was a student at Lincoln Academy, we'd walk down the hill to what used to be Wright's store and get candy bars at lunch and walk back up the hill.
Yep.
That was what we did.
Yep.
And missed it when it went away.
Yeah.
Well, let's bring it back.
Yeah, seriously. And honestly, that's what we've been thinking about. So
cool.
Yeah. So we know that you can't approve anything right now. It's the first time anybody's seen it.
Mhm.
The whole point of this is to get it into everybody's minds and see whether if it gels and you see what comes back and something that everybody likes, we can go from there. We're hoping that next time we see you, we get approval, because that would mean that we go to the state
Mhm.
and, December 7th is when we need to have all of our applications in and everything, and got to have the permit for that. So if there's anything else that strikes out at you now, I guess that's the point.
Anybody? Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, you're talking about the 5th floor, and I'm looking at the SD fabrication, and it says 4 floors is the maximum. So how do we explain how we get a 5th floor?
The floors are measured from the ground to the eave.
So we tuck it up. Okay.
So that 5th floor that we're calling the 5th floor,
free floor, because
it's
it's
the bonus floor you get under the
eaves.
Yep. Under the roof.
So
You can get, one. It does explicitly say you're allowed 1 in the eaves. No more.
you can't tuck 2 floors. in
Right.
the eaves.
Right.
Mansard.
Shoot,
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
come on.
Yeah. The other thing,
Massive cupola. I can
Yeah,
see it now.
need a tower on there. The other thing, and I know that that you mentioned if you get if there's state funding, then they require, it's a new thing, they require at least the capacity to put electric car charging.
Yeah,
And I just proposed that you're saying if we don't have to do it, we won't. It sounded like you're saying that. I don't know, but
no,
I
we
would just
do have
encourage
to.
you to do that, even if you're not required to do it.
No, we do have to do it. Yep.
But I'm saying even if if the state doesn't require it for the funding and you're doing it anyway.
Yep. So,
What the state requires is just that the conduit be there, not that the chargers be.
But they only require that if they're providing funding.
correct.
Oh, I see,
Right?
yes.
So I'm just suggesting to consider do that anyway, just because.
If it wasn't funded by. the
Even if
state.
it's not
Right,
funded by the
right.
state,
Yeah.
because, electric car charging is very convenient if you can charge at home, but that's a common problem for apartment
Yeah.
builders.
Yep,
Is that they don't own the house, you don't have the option to add EV charging.
Mhm.
And to have this many units and have none of them have
right.
access to charging a car
That is something to
Would be-
consider.
would
Uh,
be,
We will
Disappointing.
put that on. No
Yeah.
matter what.
And I mean, I guess what I think about that is even if you coil up some conduit, and some wire and all that stuff for future use, I think, in my opinion, if I was to be the one deciding it, not the state, is that it could be put in at any time. If there was breakers enough, if there was enough power to be there. I think that's what I would
right.
go for, is like, if I was to decide it, building as many buildings as I have, things always change.
Mhm.
You think you're putting it in the right place and you end up putting it in the wrong place. I think it's a good thing. I think this building's gonna have 3-phase power. Part of the benefit of being in this manufacturing zone.
Mhm.
So it could charge a lot of cars,
Mhm.
easily.
Yeah, you could consider it in the design of the parking lot too.
Yep,
Right.
It
that's-
doesn't have to be attached to the building, I don't think.
No,
No.
no.
Yeah,
no,
Right.
but yeah, I think definitely, before you pave something, it's a good idea to at least get conduit.
Right.
Conduit is key.
One thing I'm thinking about with this and future, what's your first floor height? I think the max here is 15. And I would encourage you to take
15.
every
15.
feet
feet
tall,
from floor to the floor above.
Oh, okay.
just for the first floor, yeah.
Yeah. And then it's 10 for the upper floors. But I would encourage you to take that so that the first floor is, 15 feet, for kind of future use.
Manufacturing or
So, cause
something
yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
commercial, they want to have a drop ceiling, that's important, but also, if at some point you decide you want to do fabrication there or whatever the use is, you can.
Yeah, you don't want to be.
You don't want a short ceiling.
Yep.
I mean, if it ever turns, if it's ground floor commercial space, it could be anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be a general store, which I personally I think is amazing, but it could very well be
Ethan, is
anything.
that too funny or what? Man.
So,
We might end up just flipping the whole thing and say, okay, so lucky people are gonna get to live on the 5th floor and
Yeah,
the whole
because-
first floor could go.
because that's what we've been looking at this whole time, but sorry, Ben,
No.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, it's great. It's great.
Yeah,
It's all good.
I think that store idea is a great one too.
Well, and I say that and I realize that I could hear people, if anybody's watching at home, saying like 15, it's a big building, it's
Yeah,
tall. So, if there's, and I'm not trying to encourage you to make it taller,
No, I know.
but I do think that having a tall first floor is important. But I only said it just like, we should be sensitive about the height.
As a neighbor, I'd be happy not to have it be more than the 60 feet that it already is.
Yeah, right.
My awesome view is going to be of this building.
Right.
Yes, that's why I
Although
already gonna
it's
work.
gonna be in keeping to like the building next to it, the manufacturing zone that I redid for my father, used to be Polino Tire. That building's quite tall too.
Mhm.
How tall is that?
I think it's 50 feet.
Is it?
Yep. I think it was taller than that at one point. Just from what I've heard and the way it looked when I got up there. But that was a grain silo. Train dumped grain into the basement. Then there was an elevator that went up and dumped all the grain up there. But
Yep. Yep.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're saying maybe 15 feet's not that great.
I mean, again, this is not, it's, in my opinion, it's not my opinion
yeah.
about what it looks like that really matters, but as a neighbor, I looked at this and was like, oh, it's
It's a big building.
gonna look like it looked like Red Roof Inn just arrived in Newcastle or something. That's, yeah. I didn't love it at first sight. Yeah.
But
But that's.
I may
not-
like the general store, but that's not a condition of an approval. You
Exactly,
can't,
That's not.
our
approve or
personal
disapprove.
opinions do not matter
Right.
at all.
Well, we're
No, it
here.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Nope.
No, we're here more not about opinions, but of what the facts are and what
Yep.
everybody.
Well, and I can say, having had conversations with you and Ethan, you have been pleasant to work with, but also trying to make a good project and not
Yeah.
like economize or cost engineer it like you
Min-max
get
it to death.
with some developers where they're just like, what, the numbers work, so your code says.
Yeah.
So, I say that because, I do want to, I'm happy to work with you to try to make it, feel smaller, make it smaller, whatever it is, because all of those things I think matter.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I mean, 8-foot ceilings wouldn't make any sense on the first.
Yeah.
Whether 15 is the right number, I don't know, but
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
You want more.
Yeah. And what are the upper story height, ceiling, like floor to floor heights do you?
I don't think I've gotten there yet, but I think probably 10 foot makes sense because of the framing that's gonna have to be in between each floor.
Yep.
The exterior of the building is all gonna be pre-engineered steel.
The
and
frame.
The frame, yeah. And then it's gonna be wood on the outside of that. And then it's gonna go back to steel and the same color as my shop, which is the sandstone siding and the dark green roof and trim. But yeah, it's gonna be insulated with spray foam insulation. We're gonna try and do everything that I try to get my customers to do. Because it makes sense.
Yep.
So,
Just double check that, materials and building standards for, on the facade and exterior finish must be brick, wood, clapboard, wood, shingle, cement board siding, stone, or corrugated metal, and or limestone, stucco, other materials that have the appearance of natural materials.
corrugated metal,
That has the appearance of natural materials.
corrugated metal. Wait, can you read that again?
On building facades, the exterior finish material must be brick, wood clapboard, wood shingles, cement board siding, stone, corrugated metal, and or limestone,
And
stucco,
or,
other materials that have the appearance of natural materials.
right, so this looks like board and bat. type.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Cool.
And no more than 5 materials may be used to clad a building, including siding, trim, roof, and foundation.
That makes sense.
Well, yeah, which is just so that you don't have, a crazy hodgepodge of
Right. A little here. a little
siding
there.
materials. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
Cool.
Gonna keep it crisp and clean and wide corner boards so that it doesn't look, you know,
That'll help with the look of the scale.
Yep.
Yep.
like
Absolutely.
2 feet wide.
Oh, wow.
You know, well, I was thinking about the scale, you know, it's like, you know, 4-foot overhangs wouldn't look odd on this building.
Proportionally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
Well,
all
that's
right.
really interesting. I mean, I don't really have anything else. I'm look forward to seeing the application. Obviously, I think the discussion about timing in terms of your loan and everything like
Yeah.
that, and continue working with Michael about
Yep.
the plan as you develop the application.
Yep.
Hopefully we'll see you back here, next month for
Yeah.
the approval.
Yeah, that's what we're looking forward to.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for
Cool.
coming.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Ethan.
you.
Have a great night.
You too.
I can tell you, the plan is to hopefully get them back for review and potential approval at the next meeting.
Great.
Which I believe is going to be a public hearing. It'll basically be 1 month behind what 10 Mills went through.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Great.
All right, we're gonna duck out. Thank you.
Thanks again. Appreciate it. Alrighty, so next thing on the agenda is 4B, discussion of potential core zoning code amendment to Article 7, Sections 22, demolition of historic assets.
So, and I should say, I've got, I sent 2 others for, just for you to consider. So demolition of historic assets, there's just some minor changes, but I think significant conversations that I've had with George, the code enforcement officer. What we've found is the demolition. Basically, these changes extend the protections from whole buildings to parts of buildings. So,
Thanks, Rob.
what was existing before, and it clarifies a little bit. Somebody had called and asked if they could remove cupola from a building, a historic building that I assume is older than 1900. And we were like, we can't tell you no, because this basically said structures, not allowed to demo structures. So we're like, if you're not taking the whole building down, I don't think we can tell you no. That's debatable, just really wasn't clear. So I made these changes. I think that this extends the demolition delay to parts of those buildings. It clarifies that if the building was existing before January 1st, not just any part of 1900, it's fairly minor, as you'll see. The changes were in green. So
yep.
I believe Kevin, the town manager, the interim town manager, is taking it to the select board. And they said, yeah, great, let's send it to the planning board. I had it, I think, at our last meeting. We didn't get to it. So since then, the select board's seen it. And they basically said, yeah, have a public hearing about it, assuming, which, not to digress too much, but the process that we went through with the historic special district review essentially is the same. What I think the conversations that I had with Kevin, and I think makes sense, not that we have run into this issue before, but the process typically with any kind of ordinance changes are somebody starts the process by going to the select board and petitioning them for an ordinance change, an amendment or a new ordinance. It doesn't really start here, but when the select board would kind of act as a filter of, do you have any standing to even propose this? The core zoning code does lay out who can and when propose ordinance changes. So some of this is just kind of a technicality, but starts at the select board. They say, yeah, okay, we might want to do this if it's a land use ordinance. they would send it to the planning board for a for a public hearing, and then it would go back to the select board for putting on the warrant and all of that. The clarification that I had, because local government can be messy sometimes. Like I said, we haven't had this problem yet, or hopefully ever, is to say basically that the select board is going to send it to the planning board and say, have a public hearing on it and give us your recommendation within 30 days. But if for some reason planning board went rogue, the select board essentially is like, you've got, you know, a month to have your public hearing and a month to get it back to us, so that the planning board can't just like spike the ball and kind of go AWOL and say, okay, we're going to stop, we're going to gum the whole thing up. That all is, they only say that, like, those are conversations I've had with Kevin about process, just to update you. So that's why, instead of having a public hearing on this now, since the select board technically said, yes, we want to move forward with it, still figured I'd bring it to you and say, would you like to have a public hearing on it? But I don't know, do you have any thoughts, comments on this demolition of historic assets?
I think it's a good clarification. I mean, this could apply to anything from a cupola to half the house.
Right.
Whereas previously, you maybe could have torn off the L without a permit.
Essentially, if like the way that George and I were looking at it, we were like, unless they're tearing the whole building down.
Like the whole building.
Right. So I think we want to. And all it does, like I said, all of this is already existing, like the framework here, the procedure and all of that. It really just, so we're not creating this new. It's just that if someone wants to take off a cupola or tear off an L or do whatever it is, part of the building, they have to go through this, which essentially, you know, you have to see, is there any historically significant, you know, the same thing with the cupola, offer it to somebody to take at, and we clarified in this, the acceptor's expense, not just at his or her expense, which besides maybe not being woke, is not clear either about who the acceptor,
actually,
who he
whose
or
expense
who is,
is,
right? It was so
it's the expense of the person taking.
yeah, right. So that's they're really kind of minor changes, and really all it is parts of buildings, not the entire. So
Anybody have any thoughts?
I think it looks necessary and helpful, much clearer.
I think it's appropriate. It clarifies things more. I mean, I think the original intent of having a demolition delay of only historic structures was not to only be in the case where you wanted to raise the entire building to the ground. I think it was intended that if you have, you know, an historic house with an historic I don't know, carriage house or an historic something else attached to it, cupola, whatever, you just need to put a pause for 90 days and follow the rules. You're still allowed to tear it down, as long as you follow all these things. It's to prevent unnecessary destruction of historic assets.
So the opportunity to save it.
Yeah, it gives someone the opportunity to save it should they desire to. And if terms can be met with the owner, I think.
And make sure it's not something really awesome.
Exactly. We went through this process. We went through this process a couple of times, the demolition delay of historic structures. And it actually works pretty good because it makes both the person who owns the building consider the value of what they have in the historic structure. And it makes the community consider, anyone in the community consider, you know, their oftentimes personal or emotional attachment to an historic structure does it have, financial value to them that they can make an offer to the owner and say, hey, I'll take it, if you're willing to not just burn it.
Right.
I'll take it off the site.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a reasonable thing to have in place.
I guess my only question is, if it's talking about all structures, it could be a barn, it could be who knows, any sort of building. I guess how would one determine that was built before January 1st, 1900 for like a shed type structure? I mean, how you gonna know unless your family's lived on that a piece of property for multiple generations? I mean, who's in charge of finding out information that might not exist?
Well, there's language in here where they have to consult the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. And a lot of times they'll go to the historic societies of the municipalities and ask for any documentation or photographs. Look at the quilt behind you there, like the old train station photo and things like that. And they'll say, that's what it looked like. And we know that picture is dated to that time. If there's no evidence of anything, it can't be classified as an historic structure, you know what I mean? But there has to be a determination made.
So if someone doesn't know when something was built, they have to go through the process.
If there's a possibility that it is older than 1900, yes, they have to go through the process of determining whether or not it is. So if it is a question, yeah, you're right. They have to go through this.
It doesn't mean they can't tear it down.
Doesn't mean they can't tear it down, right? But if it's like, well, I know it was built in the early 1900s, was that 1901? Was that 1910? Like, you know what I mean? That I think if it's a question, then this puts basically a 90-day, let's figure it out on the whole equation. Am I wrong about that?
That's essentially, yeah, and I think the point of like, how do you determine is important one, because you often can't pinpoint it. I mean, there's not, sometimes there's fine records, but go back before 1900, records are spotty at best. So, but I think you'd be surprised at how much, sheds, harder to pinpoint.
Definitely.
But houses, parts of houses, it at least is like reasonable whether or not you need to be worried about this or not. And then it's just checking with the historic society. I would say, meeting the standard or potential eligibility for preservation. Like if it was just a shed, probably not going to be eligible just on its own. Like unless something really epic happened there. It's like, I don't think Maine State's going to be saying that's a really important shed. So yeah, but also not to say that that's not an important point. Most of this, almost all of this is already there. And those kinds of questions are like, we can discuss whether or not the demolition of historic assets section needs.
It was just more of a
adjusting.
clarification for me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I fully understood it.
Like
It
I
is
say, it's not.
It is an interesting thing. Part of this actually, this delay of demolition of historic assets came out of the old design review ordinance. So we had that for like 15 years, and this was in there. And then when the core code was proposed, the one thing that people identified that they wanted to save, they wanted to jettison the design review ordinance, but they wanted to save this part of it. That's why it got shoved into the core zoning code. Arguably, it doesn't necessarily really belong there because it's about historic preservation, and that's not what core zoning code does, or a land use ordinance for a town. It should be part of an historic preservation ordinance, but we don't have one. So it's in the core zoning code.
I guess my only other question too is, would a foundation be considered structure still, part of a structure?
No,
If
a
we're breaking up
foundation-
into
yeah,
parts of structures, I mean,
well, unless it has archaeological significance, My understanding is that just the presence of the foundation is not considered a structure.
Yeah.
Unless it has archaeological.
I think that's, all of this is, just because it's older than 1900 doesn't mean that you can't tear it down or all. You go through this process and someone, you know, what is that?
I was just wondering if,
You know.
like someone has an old foundation on their property or
And that's it.
something,
There's no
and they want to
building.
they want to take it apart or use the granite blocks for something else.
Right.
Would they need to go through this process, or is it just something they're just rocks in the ground?
Yeah, so like the couple of examples I can think around here are like you know, the old schoolhouses, right? That have those just stack stone, fieldstone foundations or whatever. If it's got the structure on top of it, yeah, definitely, right? The building has been preserved
Mhm.
and exists, it still exists, and it was built long before, you know, but the only other one, where's that the cattle pen with the stacked stone walls that are like 6 feet tall? Where is, town is that in? Not in Newcastle.
Chips.
It's in Jefferson.
Mhm.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be probably classified as a site of archaeological significance. And it's not necessarily a structure, it's just a foundation.
But it is, that cattle pen was the whole structure.
No, I think there was something else there at some point in the past.
I mean, my understanding of the cattle pen was a thing unto itself. That was a
No, I
place
think
where you kept, you would.
there's a plaque there that actually talks about what it is.
that was a fallen population. Yeah, I mean, there's on the Riverlink Trail.
Mhm.
There's a spot where you pass the normal foundation, which you could just walk right by, but somebody has put it prior, so you can go into it. It's cool.
Yeah.
but It's not a structure. It's
Yeah.
just a cool old
Pile of rocks.
pile of rocks.
Yeah, I mean, there's one down, there's the old farmhouse foundation down in Dutch Point Preserve.
Mhm.
And then if you go out to where East and West Old County roads used to meet, that was originally a settlement. There's all kinds of stuff out there.
Mhm. Oh, there's off Indian Trail. There's a bunch of
Bunch of
just
old foundations,
old stuff.
yeah. The sunken garden, yeah, exactly. There you go. Right, yeah.
So I would say we could look at how the structures is defined. So my guess is probably you could apply to that. My other thing though is enforcement is
Yeah.
another issue, and whether or not someone clears a foundation on their property and anybody knows about it is a whole separate thing. That,
right.
Not saying that people should just do that, but it's like,
But nobody's out there with drones spying on you.
right, no, exactly. So
All right.
But-
Well, I mean, at this point, all we really need to do is decide whether or not to send this to a public hearing.
Mhm.
Well, for these sort of
Oh.
de minimis and clarifying points, I would
Mhm.
move that we do schedule this for a public hearing.
And to just clarify, the plan right now is that there may be a special town meeting in December. So, changes like this, there's some other ordinance changes that are not land use related, I think purchasing. So if we do a public hearing on this at the next town meeting, then, or the next planning board meeting, the select board will probably put it on their planned December special town
That wouldn't work.
for
Well, our next meeting is
November.
November. And then you have to have, that's the public hearing. And then you have, from that point, you have to have 30 days. For a land use.
Yeah, I'll have to say.
Doesn't matter. It's not up to us.
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying, I don't think timing would work.
Well, we can do the public hearing and then
And they can
the
just
select
set
board
it up
do
when they
whatever
want to do,
want.
because they're scheduling the special town meeting.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, I'll move
So-
it.
That one's good.
Anybody?
Second.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? 4-0 to move it to public hearing.
I sent two other changes that, or two, yeah. One is for lots. It's under Article 2 district standards. Essentially, it is reducing, I'll just read the standard. New insular lots are prohibited unless created with a deeded 50-foot wide right of way to a public or private road. This would reduce that to 24-foot wide right of way, which I came up with that number, essentially 2 12-foot lanes, whether that's sufficient. Happy for you all to discuss and share opinions with.
You just want to change. Okay, we're in Article 2, Section C, item B.
Yes.
New insular lots are prohibited unless created with a deeded 50-foot wide right of way to a public or private way. And you want to change it from 50 feet to 24 feet.
Essentially,
It's
it's
just the width of the right of way.
it's just the width of the right of way that the lot can front on.
Okay. What's the, I don't have the roads, driveways and entrances ordinance, not that I necessarily agree with it. What's the minimum lane width for a private road?
That's a good question. I think when I went through that, there wasn't anything specific that
Private road. Minimum traveled way width,
Yeah.
minimum right of way width for a private road is 50 feet,
Yeah, but what's the travel width?
12 feet.
So that's where you came. So that, yeah. So
I mean, it's 12 feet is like a fairly generous traveled way width.
yeah, and I think nowadays, design wise, they're shooting, depending on location, they're shooting for narrower lane widths.
Yeah, that's like in
To keep traffic.
Yeah, and you just don't need these massive, I mean, look around. I mean, we measured Mills Road, realized that we could literally narrow the lanes a little bit and have parking down the entire one side of it without changing anything. Just drawing some lines on the road.
Yeah. So essentially, I think that this will allow for more lots that, I mean, if you look at Rob's application, his 50 feet is wider. It's basically a lot rather than space between lots that you can front on. So, we may want to work on some, I think the roads, driveways and entrance standards need some work. I think we should really
Allocate time for that.
yeah. But I felt like in the meantime, this is a fairly straightforward. There are lots that are either creatable or already created that like you can't do anything with because they don't have a 50-foot wide right of way. It's basically 5 lanes. That's the way that I think about it. That's a lot
Well,
of
so
space.
that's kind of where I was going, was I think the new standard is like 10 feet.
Yeah, that's more, I mean, you could do 9. Cars are typically 6 to 7, 8. I mean, the tractor trailers are 8-foot wide containers.
Yeah, and I think they even reduced the minimum traveled way width for emergency vehicles from 12, I think, to 10. So my other question would be, if we lower it here for insular lots, should we not at the same time, if it's an ordinance change and we don't have time to just overhaul the roads, entrances and driveways ordinance, mirror that change in the roads, driveways and entrances ordinance for right of way width?
Do you want, I'm happy to go through and do that and make sure that all makes sense.
For example, if we made it 20 feet, assuming 2 10-foot travel widths here and in the roads, driveways and entrances ordinance, since we're already proposing a change in the right of way width,
Right.
I think it should mirror as a minimum.
I think that makes sense. The one of the things that but I think needs to be thought about when we're talking about minimum rights of way. Because there are some districts that allow 0-foot setbacks.
Mhm.
If you have a 10-foot right of way or 20-foot right of way, so it's like you could essentially have 2 lanes of traffic, but then you don't have sidewalks, so you don't have anything bad.
Right.
So that's why I said 24 feet was, I don't think you need 12 foot. This still wouldn't be really enough room for like a real, like, good sidewalks, but this really is not intended to be like, you're not driving a bus down this. It's not necessarily like a heavily traveled way.
Mhm.
So, I just throw that out there because it needs attention. This allows you to create lots. I'm happy to go through and look at the roads and driveway standards and see.
I see what you're saying. I had always hoped that the roads, driveways, and entrance doors, which was literally thrown together at the last, it's not great. It was just there because we needed something. We didn't have a lot of time to deal with it. So that's on me. But the intention was always to go back and create a more robust sort of complete streets approach to all of the road issues, including sidewalks, including travel ways and different widths for different types of roads. And I mean, all of that was supposed to have made it, just hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, I think I would recommend strongly that happen. My only real hesitation is like before we start tinkering and changing numbers, I just want to make sure that I get my arms around it, that there's not, no, you change one thing and all of a sudden,
I know
this trickle,
right.
The effects are, I can do that.
Can you just, I guess, maybe investigate if you lower it, and 24 is fine. I don't care what the number is. I think it is obvious that 50 feet wide, it seems a bit excessive. Not just for insular lots, but also for standard roads, private road. I mean, if you want to put in a private road on your own property, there's nothing that says it has to be 2 lanes. It could be 1 lane, but then you have to reserve 50 feet for 1 lane, and you're only using 10 feet of it, right? And you've got huge amounts so essentially you're creating additional setbacks that are completely unnecessary and a waste of land.
Yeah, waste of space
Right.
And so I think these are all the things that this is kind of a patch to try and make that issue not an issue anymore. But I think we need to deal with this as soon as we can.
Well, let's do this patch and see what you think about patching that as well. And
I will.
And then we'll put it in the bucket of stuff to address more holistically.
Okay. Do you want to put this on for public hearing as well?
Yep, I would. I'll make that motion. Anybody second? Move, seconded, further discussion? All in favor? What it up?
And the last one is, it's changes to 2 different parts of the plan. I mentioned earlier that subdivision has changed the state law and ours. So what I have, it might make more sense if you look at the second page under subdivision first, basically took out the division of structures into 3 or more dwelling units, the construction or placement of 3 or more dwelling units, and the division of an existing structure used for commercial or industrial use into 3 or more dwelling units.
Just take those out.
Those I said, we'll just get rid of that because the state statute doesn't apply to those. The commercial one is, I mean, that one, I'm not sure what the issue, that really wouldn't be subdivision anyway.
And it's a different way of thinking about uses and structures than we use in our core zoning code. So I'm in favor of jettisoning items 2, 3, and 4 under applicability.
So I also then added in one that is now number 2 on here. That basically is you need to go through the subdivision process if you're using virtual lot lines, which I don't know if that was how everybody understood it before. So
yes, because virtual lots, even though you don't have to create a recorded lot of record,
Mhm.
you still have to meet all the standards as if it were a recorded lot of record,
Yeah.
which means that, yes, absolutely. If you have a larger piece of property and you just draw virtual lines, but you don't want to have to actually record it, you still have to go through the process of, well, I have these virtual lots now. I can build a building, or I could go and get a permit to build a building on each one of them. You can't use virtual lots as a end run around subdivision.
So I think this is more of a clarification that that is the case. and that-
Absolutely.
That way no one tries to come in and say, well, I'm doing virtual lot lines. It's not real subdivision, so I'm not.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
need to
yeah.
do it. So that is that could happen just on its own, but I also felt like that means that multifamily, like what Xander and Ethan were just proposing, doesn't necessarily have to go to before the planning board, which may be fine, maybe not. So if you want something like that to go before the planning board, or what would be subdivision before, instead of just saying, all right, here's something that would have gone to the planning board before, we're gonna make this change, and that doesn't need to go to the planning board. If you want to go before the planning board, we can include it in this large project plan,
Mhm.
which I think, I mean, what Ethan and Xander are proposing is a large project anyway, but
As a statement of applicability
yes,
under a large project plan.
this basically, it's the creation of 18 or more dwelling units.
Yeah, I mean,
That number also, you know,
off the top of your head, I get it.
Yeah.
I think that's fine for now. But you've kind of triggered me a little bit about virtual lots, and I think we need to have a serious conversation about virtual lot subdivisions before it becomes an issue. And what you're proposing won't actually close the loophole.
what are you? Because if you're creating virtual, well, let me see, what did I say here? Yeah, well, this actually is probably subdivision law, actual subdivision statute has like all these stupid loopholes. And
Yep.
this is basically, if you're creating more than 3 virtual lots in a go, we don't care how many you did last year. We don't care when the last time you did any, if you're creating 3 on this application, you're going through subdivision.
But what is that subdivision? Let's say you get the approval. What does the subdivision approval for virtual lots actually mean? Because our current subdivision would require it be recorded at the registry of deeds, which won't accept virtual lots, only lots of record.
Yep, that's true.
And
That
so
is true.
are we creating something that we have to manage administratively ourselves, essentially our own,
Right. My
registry?
thinking, and I would want to think more about it, is essentially you would need that if you wanted to then apply to actually develop it.
Yes.
Develop more than one building on what is still just one single lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might want to put something in there that a very short timeline for before for it to expire.
An expiration, yeah.
So that way it's like, look, you subdivided it. All it really does is allow you to build those buildings. It doesn't actually allow you to, you're not selling it. You're not, you're not really subdividing.
All I'm saying is I gotta think about it.
Yeah, that's
Is that okay?
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm not saying we don't do what you suggested as the change. I just think it needs probably more finessing.
No, that's fair. I hadn't thought we don't need our own registry.
We don't need to
Virtual
create our own
deeds.
registry. That would be, honestly, Shelley would kill me, so.
Yeah. The only other thing that I didn't change, but I highlighted it just for conversation. Site improvements creating more than 50 parking spaces puts it in large project plan.
Currently?
Currently, that's what it is. That seems very high.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the parking standards in site is 10 or more.
Mhm.
It would probably make sense to have that number closer to that 10, maybe not 10,
Mhm.
but probably a lot closer, like 15.
Because 50 parking spaces is a relatively large parking
Oh,
lot.
that's huge.
If that's all you were doing, I mean, it'd be weird if you were just building a 50 lot or, adding 50 parking spaces. But I do think that they're like 10, adding 10 spaces is something that code enforcement can approve and make sure that you're meeting the applicable standards. 20 maybe is where you start getting into,
Well, each parking space is 10 by 20.
Mhm.
Right? So if you're adding 20 spaces, that's just for the parking lots, that's a lot of space. And then obviously the rest of the parking lot to navigate and get around or whatever. Now you're talking about like a larger amount of impervious surface. So that in my mind trips it right up to stormwater management, erosion control, all that sort of thing, right? Whereas 10 or less can obviously be handled administratively. It's a lot smaller impact. Stop me if I'm not making sense.
10 by 20, that sounds like it.
well, they're 9 by 18, but
20?
20.
20 parking spaces? I mean, I think that'd be more, that'd be
that's I'm the last thing I want to do is undo the like the code establishes what is liked, what the community wants generally. I'm not trying to pull more things back to the planning board and gum up what is a pretty efficient process right now. I just feel like 50 parking space, like someone came in to do 40, I think people will be like, why is this not a large project?
And why is it not being reviewed at the planning board?
Yeah,
I agree.
That's so
Yeah.
If you think 20 is it, that is fine with me.
20?
Yeah, but these are a proposal anyway.
Their proposal, it'd have to go to public
So
hearing.
Gotta come up with a number.
Yeah, I'd
20,
say
good number.
20 is a good number.
Yeah, like.
All right. Do you want a motion on these changes as well?
Yeah, assuming, I mean, unless you don't want the
No,
other thing is that
I'll move that we send these changes to public hearing as well. All in favor? 4-0. All right, you really want to get into shoreline at 9, 10?
that's what I didn't.
113 pages.
All right.
yeah.
I'm gonna say here maybe or recommend that we keep not getting to shoreland. So our options are pull a workshop of the planning board on a non-scheduled night, 2 weeks from now, for example, or kick it to next month. But it's time to go home.
The other option is, well, you probably want to actually go through it and say, I think I've already explained to you, DEP basically said, here's the stuff that's missing from your code. Put it in there. You have to enforce it even before you adopted all of that. We could just move forward with that.
Oh, and just move it to public hearing.
There are a bunch of other stuff that should probably be changed, but that's like kind of the bare minimum of.
You have to enforce this anyway. You can approve it or not.
Yeah, but do we want to bring shoreland to?
Yeah, bring it all up.
Yeah, I mean, well, no, like, do we want to have the town vote on it twice? Or do we want to actually just
Fix it.
Fix it. Yeah.
fix it once
I
and
think
have a vote on it?
Once, yeah, define it properly.
Okay, so then we're back to the two options. We either
Well,
pull a
that
workshop
is-
in 2 weeks
Workshop is
or we
fine.
push it to next. What do you guys?
As long as that's the focus.
That would be it.
Because a
There's a
workshop
whole
sounds
Yeah.
more efficient.
Yeah.
That'd be the only thing
Other
on the
things are
agenda.
going to be on the agenda.
Right. No application.
It would probably, so if you do it at a workshop, it probably is not going to fit even on the timeline that this stuff is on, which is fine. I don't think doing it the next planning board meeting where we already have these public hearings, we're gonna have Xander's thing. To lump it on that is gonna be another long meeting.
Yep.
A workshop though is just to like get it off of that. It's not gonna necessarily speed it by much, because the public notice and everything else for the public hearing is gonna, will have passed for it to be on November. For public.
Sure. But it's either, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, along with a bunch of other stuff, or a month and a half from now.
Right, right.
That's how much further down.
What do you recommend?
I would say, I think a workshop makes a lot of sense. I would say either in 2 weeks or a month and a half. Because,
If we did it in a week, would it make it?
let me see.
I mean, I don't want to game the system too hard here, but it would be nice to bundle all the changes into one town meeting.
No, it could right now, I'm gonna say no. Like you could push it. The public notice for this stuff that I spoke with Kevin about is we're gonna get it in the newspaper that's gonna come out a week from today and then 2 weeks from today. So unless you want to have the workshop like month, I don't even, maybe we could do it Monday, but I don't think we would.
Okay.
So
So
it's not a big deal. There's a lot in here, so I don't think it's unreasonable to be like, look, this is gonna have to get adopted in the spring, whenever another special meeting.
well, or another special meeting, or even if it, honestly, like you said, we have to enforce it regardless of whether it's adopted.
Mhm.
It could go on annual town meeting in June.
Mhm.
Big enough for that.
Yeah, there's a lot. This is everything that it is what our code currently is,
Mhm.
what they've told us we have to put into it. Then there's also
And then your
chapter 1000.
Chapter 1000.
And then there's also stuff that's like, we have options we can discuss, like,
We wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we just passed it to public hearing right now.
no, not without going through.
Right.
And
And
It is
so,
bigger.
and at this point, it is bigger than probably lumping it with the other ones onto a special town meeting. Because there'll be other things that the select board will want to have on that special town meeting anyway. So that special town meeting could potentially have a lot of agenda items. Let's either kick it to next month or the month after that
Mhm.
and shoot for adoption or shoot for voting in June. Because we have to enforce it anyway. So there's, what's the crazy rush? Refine it before June.
Yeah.
Are you good with that?
yeah, I would suggest though that a workshop might still make sense because it is long, and unless we just have a empty month.
But you can't guarantee.
No, exactly. So,
Oh. Then
and hopefully we don't have any empty months. 'Cause
2 weeks.
out.
2 weeks from today is the 2nd of November. And a month and a half from now. So our meeting would be the 16th of November,
Mhm.
which would mean the 30th of November would be the 2-week offset. That's probably better.
The 30th.
Well, yeah, I mean, the 2nd of November, when's voting day? 7th? The 6th or the 7th? 7th?
Yeah.
And the select board meeting is the 13th and the 27th of November, but they may want to be in here setting up and let's push it to the 30th of November. What do you guys think?
I think that's because then if you want to do a public hearing, no, it wouldn't, but that doesn't matter. I think that makes sense.
Let's workshop it on the 30th of November and set the timeline from there. Yes?
Works for me. So 6:30 on
6:30 on 11:30. Here. You just have to put that in the calendar to reserve the room.
and let you know.
We don't record workshops.
No? Okay.
Generally. I think our contract with you guys is for our regularly scheduled meetings, so I think that's fine. And workshops are really gonna try to only be about one item.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Moving down to other business, planner report, we got some of it.
You did, and I will make the rest of it as brief as I can. I already told about comp plan. We're hoping to get that submitted to the state by the end of this month. I just haven't had time to finish the checklist for them. VPI, I already told you about that Main Street thing. There's a joint select board meeting on October 30th at 5:30 here with the Damascotta Select Board to discuss housing. The Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission is presenting that big report they did on housing in the county.
Can you just email us that? Notice? I'd like to be there.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be there. I think it's just been, I think it'll be a good thing to be at.
Yeah.
You just want me to, just something to say. That
Just
that's
a
happening.
notice, hey, this
Yeah.
is happening. Put it on your calendar. Thank you.
I am on November 1st going for local project administrator training. That is mainly tied for the VPI so that we can just administer that kind of project kind of in-house instead of having to like pay us
Nice.
somebody else.
That's
So
wonderful.
that'll be good. Yeah, someone else is still going to have to actually administer the project, but
Yeah, but you can handle the local.
DOT
parties.
requires it. So
Right.
that means that we can just do it here. The Northern New England chapter of the APA conference is in Portsmouth, November 6th through the 8th. Just letting you know that's happening because planning.
Who's the, you know who the speaker is?
I did, but I forgot.
That's okay.
So that's coming. I'm going to that. You're all recommended to look into it. There is a Great Salt Bay Sanitary District Board meeting on November 8th, which I'm also going to try and go to. I'm trying to just for both Damascotta and here establish a relationship with them because development, all that.
Yep.
I've already been to one and it was pretty productive. The next planning board meeting is November 16th. That's it. We're gonna have some public hearings at that as well.
Okay. So we'll have a schedule. We'll have an agenda for,
Yes.
and we'll have an application and everything. So.
Yeah.
All right. Without objection. Oh, got
I had
one more.
one thing.
Yeah.
I just realized I had highlighted and forgot to mention on the, you're finding the fact,
Yes.
starting in 10 Mills Road, on the second page, toward the bottom, there's a,
Okay.
Found a typo.
On the second page, you said?
yeah, district standards, 2 lots, the last sentence of the second paragraph. This standard is met as all new lots created under this application well abut, no,
Oh, yeah.
just a
Will
E becomes an I.
corrected.
Awesome. All right. Nothing else? Without objection, the meeting is adjourned 9:19. Thank you.